Yak eich satini, Yuhan, Gunalchish Haki Adi. Good to see you, you all. Thank you for coming here. Looks like everyone's making their way back from the holiday break, and we have a pretty good class size again today. So it's exciting to see you back here with us. We planned a fun day today. So it's week 8, day 1, November 29th. And as folks make their way back from the holidays, we wanted to continue with our stories. And so before we broke for Thanksgiving, Shaksani Kik shared a really awesome story with us, as well as some context for how to give proper respect when you share stories. And then we had some requests, and one of them was the story of Kitch Khan. So today we'll have a nice, relaxing welcome back sort of a day. We'll open up for questions and answers. Shaksani Kik would like to share the story of Kitch Khan. And then I also have the video on Gun 100 years later. And so depending on the time that we have as we get through class, we might be able to share both stories today. But before that, how are folks doing? Do you have any questions or comments for us? Just a review, last things we worked on were our self-introduction. We talked about where we're from, where we live. We had a couple new lines for our knock-knock dialogue. Yeah, Shirley?
Yes, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment for Mrs. Kendall, whom I've taken a great deal of admiration for. I feel like she's my own personal elder now. I did use some of her teachings when I was sharing with a young person that I'm mentoring as well about introducing yourself. And when we do it in Tagish or Southern Shoshone. And here in the Yukon, many people address the, the Tagish as Tagish Kwan, but nobody could ever describe what it meant exactly. So based on our previous conversations, I shared with others that Mrs. Kendall said Kwan, when used in the context that it was used, means that you're from someplace. So both were right, but this time I understood why. And I just wanted to express my gratitude for that, because I'm already using teachings. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for letting us know. We're so lucky to have Shaksani Kik here to share her cultural knowledge and language knowledge with us.
Is the individual that wanted to hear about Ketchikan present?
Are you here with us today? Let's see, who requested the story of Kitch Khan? I'd have to look back in the video.
That would be me. Yes, I'm here today.
Kade Kaidu Kak, you do a stop.
Thank you.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Learning the language is not all about how to say words. I like to also make sure that you take away with you the history and all that goes with the culture, so that you not only speak the language, you also know something about the people and the way they think and and how they satisfy teaching the culture to the young people. So this the story I heard in regards to Ketchikan is actually a children's story. And like I said before, when the children hear once upon a time, they rush to hear the story because they know it's a fairy tale. But the Lingit children, we used to rush to hear the story when it started out with the raven walking along the beach. That was how my dad used to lure us, by starting out by that. And boy, we would rush right over to hear the rest of the story. And actually, the story is about raven that starts out with Raven was walking along the beaches, children's version of the story. So just relax and enjoy this story about the raven and his desire to always come away the winner and always getting food that other people worked on that he didn't have to work for. That was always his goal, was to get something to eat that somebody else worked on. So the beginning of the story, He's walking along the beach and looking for food, looking for someone who has food, and that he would join them and in some cases talk them out of the food that they have. So, but he wasn't, there wasn't anybody on the beach and nobody around, but he kept on going. And as he walked along, he suddenly heard a lot of laughter and talking. And he, oh boy, a party. So he started to go up into the woods, and he got up there. It was a small pond, and it was full of ducks. And the ducks were playing and splashing around and chasing each other. And he said, hey, I want to join in. So he jumped into the pond and started swimming and playing with the ducks that were playing. And as he was going around, he noticed this really pretty duck. And when my students made the paper puppets of the pretty duck, they gave her pretty lips and curly eyelashes and a ribbon around her neck, so she was really pretty looking. But he thought she was really beautiful and pretty, so he starts showing off for her. And but she wouldn't say anything. And finally he swam up to her and he said, you're really pretty. Will you marry me? And before she could answer, all the ducks took off. They all started flying in formation. And he said, hey, where are you all going? So he followed them, being positive they were probably going to go and find something to eat. But also he didn't want to lose the girl, so he was showing off for her about how he can fly and chase them. And so he joined in as they flew. And pretty soon the whole day went by and they were still flying. And he was getting really tired. So he began to ask, when are we going to stop to eat? And they just kept right on flying, and nobody said anything to him. And he was really hungry and tired. And the next day, as they were flying, he said, "Oh, hey, look, there's a McDonald's. Let's go down there. They always have a lot of extra food." And nobody said anything. They just kept right on going. And finally, the third day, he was really hungry and tired. And he said, they were flying over Sitka, and he said, let's go to Sitka. The ANS there always has a lot of good food to throw away. But the ducks kept just on flying and kept flying, and in formation. Nobody said anything to him. Finally, he was so exhausted and so hungry, he just kind of crashed. So he fell to the earth and landed in a muddy area. And it felt so cool and nice. And he just laid there, laid back and fell asleep. Fourth night, he still asleep. Fifth night, he was still sleeping. Finally, on the sixth night, he woke up and he was really hungry. And he sat up and he thought, oh my, 6 days without eating, 6 days without taking a bath. I'm really smelly. And I think I need to find a place. He was just sitting in the mud there. And he was smelling himself, and he thought, this is really bad. Making such a smell, underarm smell. And so he wanted to take a quick bath. And so he got up from there, so to find water so he could take a bath. But what happened was his body odor was so strong that he left the smell in the muddy area there. And it couldn't be removed. So they named the place Kitchan. Kitch is wings, Han is underarm smell. And that's what Kitchan means. And it's still there. And the white people call it Ketchikan. So are there any comments or questions?
Geez,
Buenas noches.
Yeah, that's usually the children's story is a long chain. You could, after so the storyteller, if they want to, can say after he had a bath or a shower, then he found some food to eat, and then he continued on with his walking along the beach to the next story. So, and that's a really short version of the story about Ketchikan.
Yuk eo. Gunnar Chish ha inki nige yashkash nik shak tsani ki.
I was hoping to hear if any of you have heard any of the Raven stories, such as the one I just told. Because there's a lot of them, and you can find them in books too. people get mixed up today with the children's stories and the actual Raven stories. Someone mentioned the story about him releasing the stars and the moon and the sun. There's different versions of that, but that is not one of the children's stories. That was a story for grown-ups.
I've heard one about Raven losing his nose.
Yeah, yeah, that was a funny one. He discovered that as he was walking along the beach, he saw all these people jigging and for halibut. And he was so hungry, he decided he would check out what they were using for bait. So he went under water and there was all these big pieces of meat hanging on the hooks, and he would grab the bait and get away before the hook caught him. But then he did get caught. His beak got caught on one of the hooks. And it was quite a battle. He had to really fight to get away. And his beak got pulled off. And when the fishermen fished it up, they said, "What is this?" They couldn't figure it out. It wasn't any kind of shellfish they knew about. So they kept it. And he had to go. He was trying to figure out what to do, because if he didn't have the beak, then he couldn't eat. So he put a blanket over himself like a hood, and started knocking on the doors. And he was saying, "I heard a strange story about fishermen fishing up some kind of a strange thing today." And that wasn't the right person, so he'd go to the next house. Finally, he found the right people. They said, "Yeah, that we don't know what it is." So he said, "Do you have it? Can I see it? Maybe I know what it is." So they brought it out. He said, "It's really hard to tell. I have to look at it outside." So he took it outside and put his beak back real fast and flew away with the beak that he lost. So
Yeah, I like that story.
yeah.
Let's see. We have some questions in the chat and comments in the chat. After you asked if people heard other stories, we got some comments. One was that one person remembers hearing a story about ravens stealing the sun and getting burnt up and turning black.
Yeah, those stories were not the children's stories, but for adults, when he got water, when he did the sun and the moon and stars, and when he created rivers and lakes and things like that, are not part of the children's stories.
Mhm. There was another one in the chat that said, "I recall someone mentioned Raven with golden stockings."
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I've heard that one, but I would like to hear it, because there really is a lot of those children's story. Could make it a really long chain. Some of them stories are longer, some are shorter. So you could spend a lot of time telling those stories.
Mhm.
Yeah, if it's written down, maybe we'd like to see it or hear it or whatever.
Goodness,
Yeah.
Tish, for the encouragement to track down my memory. Thank you, Shirley. I'll go searching.
Yeah.
Shawat Kadan, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I remember reading a long time ago a story about Raven tricking a family of bears. I don't really remember what happened in it. I just remember the bears died.
Yeah, that's one that I don't think, I think I might have heard it, but I can't remember the details on that one. But that was his main character, is to trick people out of what they have to and he was a good enough actor to get his way, so he was usually able to convince people things.
Let's
I
see.
had, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we had a couple more questions in the chat or comments, and one of them was, I'm forgetting the specifics, but something about eating too many blueberries and getting blue eyes from it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's another one. I think there was I remembered that one about the blueberries, and another one where he took his eyes out that might be tied to the blueberries. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard that one too. Let's see. Another comment in the chat. I've just finished reading The Tao of Raven by Ernestine Hayes. My first time hearing the story of Raven and the boxes of sun and sky.
Yeah. In some stories, it was in a box, and the stories I heard from my dad was all those belongings were in a bag.
Hmm.
They were in bags. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it just depends on who's telling the story.
Mhm.
But there was a really nice video that was done, and I'm not sure if it was Sea Alaska or who it was, but there was dancing and singing some of the songs that they sang and danced to in that story.
Hmm.
And I think Diane Benson was in that one. So that wasn't too long ago.
Hmm. We also have a question in the chat about how to address you, Shaksani Keek. And so the question says, thank you. I have questions to help me address Mrs. Kendall. I would like to learn the word or words for elder, my elder, or teacher, or my teacher.
Um, uh, for a teacher, I think two, and it's the person who teaches us.
Okay, I'm going to put it on the screen for folks to see. Okay. So Q&A. Iakshaku. And that means the person who teaches us.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make this bigger for folks. Let's make the text bigger. And then what about this phrase? How it was cool.
how it was cool is what we know,
Okay.
our knowledge.
Okay. Does that answer your question, the student who asked that?
Yes, it's Shirley Adamson. That is so exactly what I needed. I appreciate that because I have been, I know that the way I'm taught, we have to honor our elders and our teachers by proper how we refer to them. So that helps me a lot. Thank you.
Okay. So we're right at 12:30. There were a couple more questions or comments. I'll briefly mention them. And one was, I remember one story of ravens stealing the fresh water at a time when all water was salt water. And where the water dropped, it created streams and rivers.
Yeah, that was not one of the children's stories. It also explains how it was a white raven, and you might know some of the dance groups that talk about the white raven and how he turned black during that time when he was trying to steal the water.
Cool. The last question I see was, can you also please share and Lingit the phrase raven walking on the beach?
Do you want to hear that phrase?
Ah,
Well, it's ik yana good yes. Ik kawaii yana good yes. He was walking along the beach. Ik, there's an X on the end.
yeah, no good years.
Ik away yana good. That makes it more casual.
Yeah, no good years.
Mhm.
Okay. So I wrote it on the screen here for folks that are taking notes. Okay. So we still have 30 minutes. Should I share the video of Angun?
I want to say a few things first.
Oh,
The story that we want you to see, and you probably have seen it already, is the story of Angun and what they endured during the time of contact. And I like to always point out that we had the idea already of suing people, but we did that long before the white man introduced suing each other. So that's what we did in case of anything that happens against our clan, our tribe, or our village. You can sue them for material goods to pay for the damage what they did, and there was some very specific things that they required, like they didn't. Of course, they didn't have money, but they had to sue for something of value to a lot of people. So, and it's this is the true history of Angoon, and I think the video was done by Angoon, so you know it's for real. And it's 28 minutes long, so I think we'll have time for one or two questions afterwards.
Ik eet een cheese. I just share my screen now.
Can I say a quick thank you for the story?
Uh-huh.
Sonny, I'm sorry. I'm sharing the same screen with my granddaughter because when my phone's on, I get a lot of echoing. So I am here, but just goodness, Cheesh, I really enjoyed your story. When I used to listen to my dad tell stories and all the sound effects, it really felt good to hear yours again. So I just wanted to say goodness, Cheesh, thank you.
Nick A, thank you for bringing that up, Sonny. Okay, I have this video queued up and I'm gonna go ahead and hit play. If for some reason there's an issue with the audio, just go ahead and unmute your mic and let me know.
Hundreds of years ago, the Deshitan Raven clan of the Tlingit Indians founded the village of Angoon on southeast Alaska's spectacular Admiralty Island. On October 24, 1982, the people of Angoon began a 3-day commemoration ceremony. The ceremony culminated on October 26th, the 100th anniversary of an event that still burns in the memory of this village, an event that marks the darkest hour in its history, but one from which these people have risen back. Memory has lived on all these 100 years, for it has been their tradition to recount the story lest it be forgotten. It is the tradition of the Tlinkits of southeast Alaska that the spoken word should carry history and culture, that their beautiful creations of wood and fiber should also represent their history and their lineage, and that these highly prized works of art be displayed as their history is recounted. Yes, it is the tradition of the Raven Beaver clan, the Dog Salmon clan, the Killer Whale, and the Bear, 4 major clans of this village, that the heartbreak of October 26, 1882 can only be set to rest with an event like this. A coming together of all the people whose roots are here, wherever they may live today. A sharing of grief, a sharing of joy, the dedication of physical monuments in the ancient manner, and a rededication of spirit. This village was destroyed 100 years ago, attacked by the United States Navy at a time when the highly evolved culture of these people was little understood by the newcomers, so intent to establish a foothold and tap the natural wealth that had sustained the Tlinkits for thousands of years. Whether the Angoon bombardment, as it has come to be known, was the result of simple misunderstanding between 2 cultures in collision, or whether it was more malicious in intent, is something historians and anthropologists may never fully set to rest. But the pain of that day 100 years ago, of that first winter with their shelter and food supply destroyed, of the years of rebuilding, has been resolved as the ancient Tlingit culture prescribed it must be, in a public event. You will see as this event unfolds not only the story behind the tragedy, but the story of an indomitable spirit and the culture that preserves it. You will see how that culture even today dictates a complex order of rights and obligations that make all the clans interdependent upon each other. These proceedings may appear deceptively simple to some, but to those who appreciate the details and the nuances, there is a wealth of meaning and emotion. So come with us now and discover the interesting twists this commemoration will take and what these teach us about this fascinating Tlingit culture, how it adapts to modern times, but how it sometimes bends the people back to traditional ways. For this is Angoon, 100 years later. The ceremony commemorating the 100th anniversary of the bombardment of Angoon began in the traditional Tlingit manner, with group dancing. In this first part, called Warming of Hands, clan leaders welcomed the assembled people, symbolically inviting them to warm their hands by the host's fire. One at a time, they come forward wearing ceremonial hats, robes or vests that display their clan emblems. Some of the artwork is new, demonstrating the adoption of modern techniques. Some of the pieces are 100 years old or more. They are passed on from one generation to the next, often at ceremonies like this. The more times a piece has been passed on or displayed at a ceremony, the greater its cultural and emotional value to the clan. These artifacts come to embody the people who wore them before and the events at which they were displayed. They are shown off rarely, usually only at ceremonies. Always, warming of hands involves dancing and fellowship, for the purpose is to bring the people together spiritually as well as physically. All the many clans of the Tlingits fall into one of two major subdivisions of the entire Tlingit nation, the eagle and the raven. So it is said that the beaver comes under the raven, the dog salmon comes under the raven, while the killer whale and the bear come under the eagle. For traditional Tlingits, society, and especially ceremonial life, are governed by a rich and complicated pattern of interactions between the two sides, the eagles and the ravens. For example, all marriages are between an eagle and a raven, never between members of the same side. Clan lineage is traced through the mother's family line rather than through the father's, as in European cultures. Thus, all the children belong to their mother's clan. From the mother's clan, the children inherit the right to use the clan's emblems, claim its history, and share its prestige and wealth. Besides their parents, the most important person in the children's life is their mother's brother. That's their maternal uncle. The uncle is the person most responsible for the children's education and development into mature members of their mother's clan. The uncles were stern taskmasters. For a traditional Tlingit, his clan is that of his mother, and he calls his ancestral clan homeland, the land of my uncles. One of Jay Hammond's last public appearances as governor of Alaska was at Angoon's commemoration ceremony. Tlingits bestow ceremonial names upon their own people, and to non-Tlingits they greatly respect. Ceremonial names are handed down from generation to generation. The names of great people might not be given again for several generations, until a person of appropriate stature and accomplishment is found. When a person has been honored with a name from the past, he assumes all the rights and obligations of the person who last held that name, including clan relationships. In terms of the ceremonial life of the clan, the contemporary person has become the deceased person who had that name. So in a manner of thinking, great leaders and loved ones are with the Tlingits again. As we shall see later, this can be a source of comfort and strength to all.
And now you will witness the formal and traditional giving of name.
Here, Governor Hammond is officially adopted into the brown bear clan. His new name means you don't see a brown bear coming through the forest. When you first see him, he's already in front of you.
The name will now be placed on Governor Hammond, the Lingit name. Sikatu Staja, Sikatu Staja, Sikatu Staja, Sikatu Staja, Sikatu Staja, Sikatu Staja. Thank you very much.
And as in all things Tlingit, the family must share in the occasion. In this case, a brand new family of clan brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and so on.
Today, however, has as well a sad side. Since the three-way celebration really marks the 100th anniversary of a historical event which no American can think back upon without some sense of shame. America, for example, conquered our so-called Wild West, but did so in a manner most now find abhorrent. The victims of one such occurrence we are commemorating here today. On October 26, 1882, the U.S. Navy, for whatever reason, misinformation, rumor, fear, cultural ignorance, bad communications, miscalculations, or who knows, to, quote, teach the natives a lesson, bombarded, burned, and destroyed this native village of Angoon. In the process, they willfully, according to reports, attempted to destroy the traditions of this native village. Along with all provisions and homes, with winter soon to arrive, this left an entire people to starve or die from the elements. And some, I understand, did.
This was Tlingit Ani, land of the Tlingit, the land over which they had enjoyed undisputed dominion for centuries. With the coming of the white men and their superior weapons, this was changing. When the first Europeans appeared on their shore in the 1700s, the Tlingits were respected and feared by the other native peoples along the entire North Pacific coast, from Alaska to California. They were the fiercest warriors, the most aggressive traders, and the shrewdest. The rich coastal environment and forest provided more than enough food to sustain them and allowed leisure time for art and a rich social life. Throughout southeast Alaska, each of the Tlingit tribes sought to be the wealthiest, the most powerful, the most artistic, and the noblest. Within each clan, great leaders emerged, rising according to their abilities and accomplishments. Their wealth and prestige brought honor to their clans. Lineage and ancestry was all important. Nobility and rank amongst the Tlingits was no less important in their world than among the royal families of Europe. High-caste Tlingits spoke their language with an eloquence equal to that, for example, of the English upper classes. By 1880, the fur seal population had already been wiped out to satisfy the markets of Europe, and now the Americans were establishing large commercial fishing operations, helping themselves to the salmon runs long considered the property of the clans. Whaling brought more white men, but that also meant more trade goods which the adaptable Tlingits valued, like clothing, metal tools, and guns. The Tlingits had never been conquered in the traditional sense. To their way of thinking, this was still their land. The foreigners presented as many benefits as threats. It was an uneasy peace, and the Tlingits' pride demanded they retain their traditional stature, as they were accustomed. The Northwest Trading Company ran a reduction plant at Killisnoo near Angoon, where they made herring and whale oil. Tithlain, a Tlingit medicine man born of noble blood, was employed by the company as helmsman on a whaling launch. On October 22nd, a harpoon gun exploded, killing Tithlain. It was Tlingit law that if a person was killed working for someone else, the employer must make a restitution payment. Such restitution payments had been made by the company in the past. However, 2 weeks earlier, another Tlingit had been accidentally killed, and the customary payment was not made. The Indians let the matter go, but now this was a medicine man, and a nobleman at that. Tlingit law must be honored. The Indians took possession of 2 launches until such time as payment was made, and also to ensure the equipment associated with the death was not used again until after the mourning period. Tichlane's death required sizable restitution payment. 200 blankets were demanded. The highest-ranking American official in the territory of Alaska was at Sitka, Naval Commander E.C. Merriman. He had already decided that no longer would the tribal law of the Tlinkits be respected by American forces. It was time, he decided, that the Tlinkits acknowledge American supremacy and authority. And so, to make his point, Merriman sailed to Angoon with a fully armed U.S. Revenue Service cutter and a large civilian tugboat he'd armed with cannon and Gatling gun. For punishment, Merriman made his own demand. The Indians must pay him 400 blankets, or he would destroy their village with cannon fire. Merriman ordered the Indians' canoes destroyed to show he meant business. The Tlinkits could produce only 81 blankets by the next day, and Merriman launched his attack. First, the nearby storehouses filled with food for winter were shelled and burned. Next, volley after volley of cannon fire struck the great communal clan houses, each with a history reaching back into time and legend, until, one at a time, they fell into rubble. Next, Marines and sailors poured through the ruins, looting and destroying priceless works of art inherited through generations, all adorned with emblems of the clans, symbols of the Tlinkits' greatest treasure, their clan identity. That winter, devoid of adequate shelter, their vital canoes, weapons, and food stores all gone, the Tlinkits wandered the beaches, scraping together what food they could, such as clams, gumboots, and crab. It is not known how many died that winter of starvation and exposure. It took 5 years to rebuild the village. To this date, there has never been an official investigation of the incident by the government.
While the artifacts and traditional treasures which were destroyed the day of the attack 100 years ago can never be replaced, all residents of Angoon, by the courage you have shown over the past century in recovering from that attack, have created a new history for the citizens of this village, and one of which all Alaskans can be exceedingly proud. We can only hope that in 1982, all Alaskans have learned from the past mistakes, and that never again will we permit our people to become so separated into warring factions because of mistrust and misunderstanding. The bombardment of this village 100 years ago is the ultimate example of a tragedy which can strike when people no longer listen. Let's learn from our past mistakes. Our future as a wise and just people can survive with nothing less. Thank you.
These are the representatives of the households of the Taishitan clan. 100 years ago, October 24th, a shell hit our shaman Titlain. For 100 years, we have kept it in our hearts and minds. Why wait 100 years, asked someone. For the first time, we are going to say it. For the first time in 100 years, we are going to say, we have reservations to what extent it was an accident. We have reservations to what extent the shelling of each household was an accident. For 100 years, we had locked this up in our hearts, silently cried and moaned the death of 6 children.
As you might suspect, this is not a traditional Tlingit ceremonial hat. This hat has a different meaning. According to tradition, it is held and displayed as a symbol of a debt unpaid, the debt of respect. The lack of respect the Navy showed for the Tlingit's traditions 100 years ago, and the lack of respect today. Representatives of Angoon have met with the U.S. Navy and requested an official apology for the bombardment, but to date, there has been none. The Clinkets of Angoon symbolically allow the Navy the opportunity to respond. For 2 minutes, all remain silent, waiting. Of the 6 children that died in the bombardment, 3 were from the killer whale clan. For Jimmy George, cultural leader of today's killer whale people, those deaths symbolize his ancestors' suffering. Here, Mr. George is presented with a replica of the killer whale pole that once stood at Angoon. In this way, Angoon recognizes those killer whales who died. Thank you for accepting this replica. Someday we will build a totem pole in front of your clan house. Thank you. Jimmy George's parents lived through the bombardment, and he remembers the stories they told him about that day and the suffering that followed. The totem image of the killer whale recalls his loved ones and their suffering. Several years ago, Tom Jackson inherited the clan name of Jimmy George's uncle. Today, he fulfills a Tlingit uncle's obligation to provide strength and support. When a boat is destroyed or ruined and cannot be used any longer, then it is put on the beach. When the others say, "Where is your boat?" he says, "It is put ashore. It cannot be used. My children, my children, this is the way I am. I am thanking you for the honor and the strength you are giving me. For now I am still with you, but my time is limited." Here you have brought him among you, honoring him. Thank you. I will not speak lengthily. He is the last among us. If he should have troubles, if his oars should break, I will always depend on you for comfort and strength. Angoon is a raven village of the Deshitan clan. As such, they acted as hosts for a potlatch, or ceremonial feast. Traditional Tlingit foods like salmon and venison are in abundance. But most prized are the delicacies such as herring roe and seal oil. But more than eating and socializing, potlatches are ceremonial affairs. A leader of the Eagles from the village of Cake is ceremonially placing this raven hat upon a raven leader from Klawak. Thus, members of the opposite side always perform ceremonial courtesies for each other, and according to custom, the presence of such visiting dignitaries from other villages lends importance to this commemoration. The dog salmon hat they are holding was made shortly after the bombardment to replace a masterpiece destroyed by the Navy.
We were hesitant to bring this hat out, but now on this occasion we felt it appropriate that this hat should be brought forward, that you might see it.
Some pieces of Tlingit art have great reputations, and their display in itself adds importance to a ceremony. This priceless dog salmon hat is almost 100 years old. Two houses of the dog salmon clan stand in Angoon today. Here, a clan member of appropriate rank performs a dance in honor of the dog salmon spirit. The person is hidden behind the blanket because it is the animal spirit that is dancing. According to Tlingit mythology, In the ancient past, each clan formed a special relationship with the animal spirit for which it is named. Today, as in old, many Tlinkits still feel a special bond with certain animals, their clan symbols. And just as important, they feel a bond to other people from any community who have the same crest.
Being very frank, I can remember just a few years ago when people would look to Angoon and say, that community hasn't progressed as much as some of the other communities in southeastern Alaska. It doesn't have the roads, it doesn't have the new buildings. But as a matter of fact, what was happening in Angoon would serve to strengthen all of us in the other communities who at that point were making more material advances. Because what was happening in Angoon was a people husbanding its strength, a people protecting its culture, a people saying to the outside world, we will develop at our own pace. There are things that we hold dear and that we cherish and that we treasure that you may not understand. And during these 3 days, as you celebrate, what you are doing is commemorating, memorializing, and serving notice that this is a people that will never be beaten, that this is a people that will never succumb, a people who may be shelled, a people who may have their homes destroyed, a people who may have at a moment in time their livelihood destroyed, but a people who in spirit will never ever die.
Today, in living proof of that spirit, Angoon is dedicating 3 totem poles. Someday there will be more, all replicas of poles that once stood here. Totem poles are carved and erected for ceremonial purposes like this 100-year commemoration. Traditionally, they are commissioned by leaders to commemorate a relative, an historic event, or to display inherited clan emblems. Here, they are dedicating commemorative poles in honor of clan members who suffered and died because of the bombardment. Totem poles are the embodiment of the clan's history, its cultural identity, and a source of pride to its members.
There's a culture, and it's alive, and shouldn't be forgotten. I did all this whole work, and this project was a lot of work. I've never worked so hard at anything in my life. And I did it all for the young people. When they go on their way to school, you know, in the morning, and they're half awake, they can look up and say, well, that represents me, you know, that's me up there.
And who will these children be? What will they believe in? Will it be the human values of their centuries-old culture, and will these give them a sense of identity and belonging in the world? Will they grow up believing and practicing the ideals of freedom, fairness, and generosity that Americans are so proud of? These are all hopes that the people of Angoon have for their young ones, children who hopefully will never know the pain born of ignorance and prejudice. This commemoration ceremony has done much to heal the wound, to reconcile the suffering of those now gone, the hurt of those who remember their story, the wounded pride of these proud people. But the wound is not fully healed. It cannot be, not until the United States Navy responds with the one gesture so important to these people, to any civilized people, an apology for a wrong committed. Once upon a time, America was a young nation eager to expand its frontiers, tame the wilderness, and harness its wealth. But in the overconfidence and exuberance of youth, mistakes are made. Today, America is a more mature nation. Is it not a sign of maturity to admit one's mistakes? Is it not a sign of true greatness for the mighty to acknowledge the small?
Shkasnik klein yewutu. Gonif chish hawak shik eyiti. Yashkasnik shaksanik week. Stuba khateti konach gonif chish. Okay, that was a big story. I was just thanking Shaksani Keek for showing it to us. And I know we're up at time, it's the end of class, and folks need to continue on with their day. But I just want to take a moment to remind you that when we acknowledge history, especially something that is a big, important story like this, where it hits close to home, it's a difficult history to bear, just take moments throughout the day to take care of yourself. You might find that you're hungrier at random moments, you're thirsty. So drink lots of water, feed yourselves, get some fresh air, and goodness cheese for being here. Before we break for the day, does anybody have any questions or comments for us? Okay, we just had another thank you note in the chat. And if we don't have any more questions or comments, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you here on Thursday at 12 p.m.